I wanted to build an outdoor coffee table made out of really big burnt beams. A sort of rustic with a modern twist type deal. 2 problems though. First, I don't have any big beams to work with. And second, I don't have any experience with burning wood for an aesthetic effect. So to make up for my lack of a beam situation, I decided that I'd use some much thinner pieces of red oak to make a couple of faux beams. And then to make up for the fact that I'd never done this before, I brought in a teacher. Well, sort of a faux teacher. You'll see what I mean when you watch his video. Just kidding, Johnny. We love you. Alright, so Johnny and I are making 2 pretty different projects on our respective channels. And I'll link to his in my description and in the end card at the end of this video so that you can check it out. But the thing that they have in common is both employ a technique called Shosugiban, or at least a technique that we've adopted from what actual Shosugiban is. And also both are made from red oak. A lot of red oak, in fact. And all I've been doing and am doing in these shots is getting the pieces that I could use for my beam. So I'm cutting them to rough length, cleaning up one edge on the joiner, and then ripping the other edge on my table saw. That way I have some nice clean boards that I could start working with. Here I'm gluing up my sub assemblies, and what I'm going for are beams that are 12 inches wide and thick and 4 feet long. So I needed to glue up 8 panels that consisted of 2 boards each. And this will take care of the top, bottom, and sides. And then we'll get to the end caps a little later since that part was a little bit more tricky. The next morning, after everything was dry, I used my sliding crosscut table to cut a bevel onto the end of each of the pieces. And then after that, I could use my fence to put a bevel along the edge of each of the pieces. So after you've made the 4 cuts on each piece, you'll have 8 pieces that look like this. And each beam is made of 4 of them. And here's a little animation so you can see how they come together. And again, here you'll notice that we still haven't tackled those end caps, but let's glue up these guys for now and then we can get to that. For the glue up, I decided to go with the painter's tape method. This is a relatively big piece, but I've done it on larger pieces before, so I felt pretty confident. And you'll notice here that I'm only folding up 2 joints instead of all 4 at once. I thought I might just get a cleaner result doing it this way. Anyhow, so after the first 2 were dry, I could move on to the remaining to complete the box. Again, except for those end caps. Okay, let's get to those now. So the reason I've kind of been delaying the end caps is because it's the hardest part of the faux beam to, well, fake. A real beam would basically have 3 different types of grain. Edge grain, face grain, and end grain. To fake the end grain, there's a few different ways you could go. One option would be to get a slice of a log, sometimes called a cookie, because the face of this is going to be all end grain. So you could basically just cut out a little square and use that as your cap and pop it in. But I don't have any cookies, so let's talk about other options. Another would be to get a bunch of boards, lop off the ends, and then glue them back up to make kind of like an end grain cutting board. And this should work, but I didn't do that either, and I'm glad that I didn't because I think the burn technique would have wreaked havoc on it. And you'll see what I'm talking about when you watch Johnny's video after this one. Another option still is to just rotate some face grain around one of the ends, so you'd end up with a beam that either flows like this or like this. Neither would look real, which is fine, but one would look more aesthetically nice than the other one, at least in my eyes. I didn't want to do that either, so my first thought was to just kind of lean into the fact that it's a faux beam and do something decorative and fun on the ends. My idea was to make an end cap of 4 pieces, either like this or like this. I went with that first. Now one of the problems with this idea is that every joint here is going to be end grain to edge grain. So edge grain to edge grain joints are very strong, and end grain to end grain joints are very weak. I'm gonna guess that edge grain to end grain joints are probably somewhere in the middle, but I would say leaning towards the side of weak. So I glued them up, tested them out, and well, obviously that wasn't gonna work. So the next option should have been to do the 4 pieces on a diagonal. But before I did that, I had one other thought. Why not just do one long diagonal? It kind of takes away the problem where you're favoring one of the sides of the beam, and because I'm making 2, I could have it where the grain kind of converges into a V. Now, I don't know if I just talked you into liking that idea, but I definitely sold myself, so that's what I went with. Okay, now let's get to the fun stuff. First of which was power carving these guys. Basically, I just wanted to give them a little character by de-stressing and weathering them the way that an actual beam would be. And this was my first time doing anything like this, but it was honestly a ton of fun, and I can't wait to do more patterning and texturing in some other pieces moving forward. And while I'm working on that, let me just take a second to thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Building a website with Squarespace is easier than building a fake log. Quite a bit easier, in fact, and they usually look nicer too. I've been using Squarespace for almost 2 years now, and I've recommended it to a ton of people, both here and in my personal life. And I haven't heard one person complain yet. And I think the reason for that is because it's just super simple and the outcomes look awesome. They have a variety of templates that are perfect for any kind of website you might be dreaming up, be it a personal portfolio, an online store, or something for a brick and mortar like a restaurant. And if you ever need assistance, they have great customer service, which I can personally vouch for. So basically, whatever it is you're looking to do, they'll be there to help you do it. And best of all, right now you can start a free trial by visiting squarespace.com/Foureyes and save 10% off your first purchase when you use the offer code Foureyes at checkout. So if you're thinking about starting a website, or even if you have an existing one, you owe it to yourself to at least give them a look. All right, thanks Squarespace. Okay, so power carving was fun, but now things are about to get funner. Or more fun. You know what? I don't know which one's right, so I'll just say enjoyabler. So I guess while I burn these, I'm just gonna shut my mouth for a second and let you enjoyable. Okay, so that was fun, but there's still one last thing that we have to do, and that's build a base. And since these beams are pretty rustic looking at this point, I wanted something that was kind of minimalist, industrial, modern, whimsical. That's how I'll describe it. So here's a drawing to show you what I was going for. It kind of plays on the idea that this could be something like a rack that keeps the beams off the ground so that a forklift could get them. That's where the industrial adjective comes from. And then I think I'm gonna paint them some bright pop of color. That's where the minimal, modern, whimsical aesthetic comes in. So in order to make this, I cut off a small chunk of 8-quarter oak that I could get all of my pieces from. These were already in pretty good condition, so I just used my table saw to cut each piece, rotate it 90 degrees, and then cut it again so that they'd be consistently 1.5 inches wide and thick across their lengths. Speaking of length, next I used my crosscut sled to cut all the pieces to length. In total, I'm gonna need 3 long pieces and 3 shorter pieces. Easy enough. But with the shorter pieces, I'm going to put a 45-degree cut on top of each to give the base a little bit more detail. And after that, we could move on to sanding and finishing. So the burnt wood's going to be pretty thirsty, and you can see here it just pretty much drank up whatever I put it on, but that's okay because you don't really have to be neat with this kind of a finish job. Just sort of slap it on and let it drink it up. Basically, you just want something that's going to solidify all the soot so that it doesn't come off on your hands every time that you touch it. And finally, after a bit of sanding on the base, we could throw on a few coats of this pinkish, orangish, salmonish color and put it all together. So in the end, I don't think this came off as looking real. Like, I don't think it's gonna fool anybody who knows anything about wood, or anybody who's asked point blank. If anything, I think it has an almost sort of cartoony quality to it. Like if you were to draw this idea out into a cartoon, and then try to capture that aesthetic in the real world, I think that that's what this is. To me. Alright, that's all folks. Special thanks to Benjamin Calloway, Jesse Toland, Ian Stafford, David Garcia, Patrick Clancy, Mike, all of the Mikes I guess, and the rest of my Patreon members for making these videos possible. Simply put, without you, I don't think I'd be in the position that I currently am, where I'm building things and making videos full time now. Each and every one of you is responsible for making that dream a reality and keeping it alive. So from the most sincere place in my heart, I say, thank you for enabling me to do these things. Truly. And if you want to find out how you can support the show too, check out the Patreon link in the description and see if it's right for you. And as always, no pressure. All right, see you in the next one.